The wind moved through Sherwood Forest like a living thing, whispering through oak and yew, carried with it the smell of damp earth and iron. Somewhere in the distance, a raven cried, sharp and warning. Men crouched low among the roots and brush, faces smeared with mud, fingers tight around bowstrings already worn smooth by years of war. No one spoke. They had learned long ago that silence was as valuable as steel. Robin watched the road below from the rise of a hill. The torchlight of the convoy flickered like nervous fireflies, revealing the slow movement of wagons creaking under the weight of grain and silver. Norman soldiers marched beside them, boots heavy, shoulders tense. These were not green men. They were veterans, and that made them dangerous. Robin knew the way veterans thought, because he had once marched like them, under banners that promised glory and delivered only graves. A horse snorted. One of the archers beside him shifted, breathing too fast. "Easy," Robin whispered, not turning his head. "They'll hear your heart before your breath." The young man swallowed and nodded. He was barely old enough to shave, yet the sheriff's taxes had taken his family's land and his father's life both. War had a way of aging boys overnight. Below, the captain of the convoy raised a fist, signaling a halt. The soldiers formed a loose perimeter. Steel scraped against leather as shields were adjusted. They felt it now. The pressure, the sense that the forest was watching them. Every time, one soldier muttered, "This cursed wood." Another spat into the dirt. "It's not the forest. It's him." Robin lifted his hand. Around him, men tensed, muscles coiled like drawn wire. These were former soldiers of the king. Archers, spearmen, scouts. Men abandoned when crusading ships sail home without pay or promise. The sheriff called them thieves. The crown called them rebels. Robin called them brothers. A sharp whistle cut the night. Arrows fell from the dark, not in chaos, but in clean, disciplined arcs. One struck a wheel spoke dead center, splintering oak and halting the lead wagon in a scream of breaking wood. Another pinned a soldier's arm to a tree trunk, shallow enough to spare his life, deep enough to take him out of the fight. "Ambush!" the captain shouted. "Shields up." The order came too late. Smoke pots rolled across the road, bursting into thick gray clouds. Horses reared and screamed, eyes rolling white. Men coughed, blinded, shouting orders no one could hear. Robin moved through the haze like a memory of war. His bow rose, fell. Each shot counted, each target chosen. No killing unless forced. That rule mattered. It was a line between resistance and slaughter, between justice and revenge. A soldier lunged blindly from the smoke, sword swinging wild. Robin stepped inside the arc and struck him with the butt of his bow. The man fell hard, breath exploding from his lungs. "Down!" Robin snapped. The fighting lasted less than 5 minutes. When the smoke thinned, the convoy was broken. Soldiers disarmed, wagons surrounded by silent men with arrows trained steady and unforgiving. The captain stood rigid, blood running from a cut above his eye. He stared at Robin, recognition dawning not from rumor, but from experience. "You command like a king's man," the captain said. Robin lowered his bow slightly. "I was one." "Then you know what this is," the captain said. "Treason." Robin's eyes flicked to wagons, to the sacks stamped with the sheriff's seal. "No," he replied calmly. "This is theft returned." He gestured with his chin. "Leave the silver. Take your wounded. You walk out alive." The captain hesitated. Pride warred with survival. Finally, he nodded. "This won't end here." Robin met his gaze. "It already has. You just haven't reached that part yet." When the soldiers were gone, the forest seemed to breathe again. Men emerged from cover, tension draining from their shoulders. They worked quickly, efficiently, like a unit long drilled. Grain was carried into the trees, silver divided into small, easily hidden bundles. Later, under the cover of deeper night, the food was delivered to the villages. No banners, no speeches, just hands passing bread, eyes shining in disbelief. An old man crossed himself. A mother wept silently as she hugged her child. A woman with hands rough from years of labor touched Robin's sleeve. "They'll kill you for this," she whispered. Robin gave a faint, tired smile. They've been trying for years. He turned back toward the forest, the weight of command settling heavier on his shoulders than any armor. Victory always felt hollow up close. He knew what would come next. Retaliation. Gallows. Innocents made examples of. In Nottingham Castle, the sheriff listened to the report in silence. The torchlight caught the twitch in his jaw as the messenger finished. They spared us, the man said, voice shaking. Took only the tax wagons. The sheriff's lips curled, not in relief, but in rage. Mercy, he said softly, is a provocation. He stood and turned toward the window, where the dark line of Sherwood cut the horizon. Raise the gallows, he ordered. Twice the patrols. Triple the taxes. If the forest shelters him, we will starve the forest. Outside, drums began to beat, slow, deliberate, carrying across stone and field alike. Back in Sherwood, Robin listened to those distant echoes. He knew that sound. It was a sound that came before battles, before sieges, before names were carved into memory or forgotten altogether. Legends were not born in songs, he thought. They were born in moments when fear met resolve and refused to turn back. And the war for Sherwood had only just begun. Dawn crept into Sherwood like a reluctant witness. Pale light filtered through the branches, revealing the scars left behind by the night. Broken twigs, dark stains in the mud, arrows snapped and abandoned. Robin had not slept. He sat on a fallen log, sharpening a knife that did not need sharpening, listening to the forest wake. Birds sang cautiously, as if unsure whether the peace would hold. From the ridge above the camp, Little John returned at a jog, breath heavy. They're moving, he said. 3 columns. Sheriff's men. 1 from the West Road, 2 from Nottingham. Robin stopped his blade. How many? More than last time. And they brought spearmen. Proper ones. That confirmed what Robin already felt in his bones. The sheriff was no longer treating this as banditry. This was a campaign. Men gathered as the word spread. Some tightened straps, others checked bows. A few stared into the trees, weighing choices they had hoped never to face again. War asked for everything, and it always collected. Robin stood. We don't fight them head-on, he said calmly. We bleed them, then disappear. Remember, this forest is older than their armor. A murmur of agreement followed, though fear threaded through it. These men trusted him, and that trust was a heavier burden than command. By midday, the sound of horns echoed through the woods. The sheriff's soldiers advanced cautiously, shields up, eyes darting. They had learned from the convoy. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt hostile. An arrow struck the trunk inches from a sergeant's head. Another followed. Then another, drawing the column deeper, always just out of reach. Orders were shouted, formations tightened, but every step forward cost them. Near a narrow ravine, Robin gave the signal. Rope snapped taut. Logs swung down from above, smashing into shields and helmets. Men screamed as the ground gave way beneath them, the ravine swallowing bodies and steel alike. Pull back, a knight shouted. This is a trap. They tried. The forest would not let them. Still, the sheriff's men were disciplined. A countercharge drove Robin's archers back, and steel met steel in close quarters. The clash was brutal, intimate. No room for legends here, only sweat, blood, and breath. Robin locked blades with a knight whose armor bore the crest of Nottingham. The man was strong, trained, relentless. You could have served the crown, the knight snarled. Instead, you hide like an animal. Robin twisted, breaking contact. Animals know when they're hunted. He struck, disarming the knight, then stepped back, choosing restraint over killing once more. But restraint had a cost. A cry cut through the noise. One of Robin's men fell, an arrow buried deep in his chest. He was young, the same archer who had shaken the night before. Robin reached him too late. The boy's eyes searched his face, confused, afraid. We stopped them, didn't we? The boy whispered. Robin nodded, throat tight. Yes, you did well. The boy smiled once, then went still. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single loss. Then another horn sounded, closer, louder, more coming. Little John shouted. Robin closed the boy's eyes and stood. Grief hardened into something sharper. "Fall back," he ordered. "To the river paths." They melted into the forest, leaving the sheriff's men battered and furious. Victory, if it could be called that, tasted like ash. By evening, Nottingham Castle's gates opened to receive the wounded. The sheriff watched them return, armor dented, numbers thinned. "He's costing U.S. men," a knight said. "The villages are watching. They're beginning to believe." The sheriff's face remained still. "Belief is a weapon," he replied, "and I intend to take it from them." The next day, the gallows went up in the square. 3 villagers were dragged before the crowd, accused of aiding the outlaws. Their crimes were thin, their terror real. From the edge of the forest, Robin watched the executions through a gap in the trees. The crowd was silent, not with obedience, but with rage held in check. Little John's voice trembled. We should stop it. Robin's hands clenched. Every instinct screamed to act, to loose arrows, to turn the square into a battlefield. But he saw the soldiers hidden among the crowd, the archers on the walls. A rescue would become a massacre. "No," he said hoarsely. "That's what he wants." The trap snapped shut anyway. The villagers died, and with them, something fragile and dangerous was born. That night, fires burned in Sherwood as men gathered. Not just outlaws now, but farmers, millers, sons of executed men. They came with tools, hunting bows, old spears pulled from barns. Robin addressed them in the firelight. "This isn't about me," he said, "or silver, or revenge. It's about whether fear rules this land, or we do." No cheers followed, just nods. Quiet, determined, war had chosen its sides. Weeks later, a royal banner appeared on the road from the south. Word spread fast. King Richard was returning. Hope surged through the villages like a hell breath released. The sheriff tightened his grip, knowing time was no longer his ally. Robin stood once more beneath the trees, looking toward the road. He had wanted to protect his people without becoming what he hated. Now he understood the truth every soldier learns too late. War does not ask what you want. It only asks what you are willing to lose. Rain fell hard and unrelenting, turning the forest floor into slick black mud. It was the kind of weather that slowed armies and broke morale, but Robin welcomed it. Rain hid tracks, muffled movement, and blurred the line between hunter and hunted. Sherwood became a maze again, and the sheriff's men hated mazes. Robin stood beneath a dripping oak, listening to the steady hiss of water on leaves. Messengers had arrived throughout the night, breathless and soaked, carrying the same news from different directions. Villages were refusing to pay. Tax wagons were turning back untouched. The sheriff had answered with fire. They burned Eastwell at dawn, Much said quietly. 3 homes, 1 barn, took 2 men. A low growl of anger moved through the group. Robin felt it too, sharp and bitter, but he forced himself to think past it. Rage made men reckless. The sheriff wanted recklessness. "We can't protect everyone," Lil John said, stating the truth no one wanted to hear. "Not with the men we have." Robin nodded. "Then we protect the symbol." They looked at him. "Nottingham," he continued. "The roads, the flow of money. If we choke that, his grip weakens everywhere." The plan was dangerous. It meant moving closer to the castle, into territory thick with patrols and informers. It meant shifting from harassment to siege in all but name. That night, they moved. The first strike came on the river crossing south of the town. A patrol vanished into the dark, their bodies never found, their horses cutting loose and fleeing into the fields. By morning, the bridge timbers smoldered, collapsed into the water below. Next, the mill outside Nottingham was seized. Grain was redistributed before the sheriff's men could respond. The miller rang the bell not in alarm, but in defiance, its iron voice carrying across the fields. Inside the castle, the sheriff slammed a goblet against the wall, wine splattering like blood. "He's surrounding us," he snarled. "A ghost siege." "Then flush him out," a knight suggested. "Burn the forest." The sheriff smiled thinly. "No, we burn the heart." At dawn, the bells of Nottingham rang. not for prayer, for execution. Robin heard them from Sherwood, each toll heavy and final. Scouts confirmed what he feared, a public hanging, for prisoners. One of them, a woman accused of carrying messages. Marion, the name struck him harder than any blade. Memories surfaced unbidden. Laughter beneath apple trees, argument about duty and honor, the last time he had seen her as he marched to war under Richard's banner. "She'll die," Lil John said. "They're using her to draw you out." Robin stared toward the distant walls. He knew it was a trap. He also knew he would walk into it. "We go in," he said. Silence followed. "This ends one way or another," Robin continued. "Today." They moved through the city like shadows, cloaks pulled low, weapons hidden beneath common cloth. Nottingham bustled, tense and whispering. Soldiers lined the square, archers on the rooftops. The gallows stood ready. Marion was already there, hands bound, face pale but defiant. When she saw Robin emerge in the crowd, her breath caught, but she did not look away. The sheriff watched from the platform, eyes gleaming. "People of Nottingham," he called, "you harbor traders, today you learn the price." A stone clattered, then another. Fear shifted, cracked. Robin stepped forward. "Enough," he said, voice carrying. The square erupted. Arrows flew. Smoke burst. The crowd scattered in screams. Robin's men surged from alleys and doorways, striking fast, precise. Rooftop archers fell to counterfire. Ropes were cut. The gallows collapsed. Robin reached Marion as soldiers closed in. "Still terrible timing," she said, breathless. He smiled once. "You always said that." They ran. The escape was chaos. Steel ringing, men shouting, horses screaming. At the east gate, a knight barred their path, blade red. "This ends here," the knight said. Robin met him head-on. The fight was brutal, personal. They crashed into the mud, grappling. Robin felt the knight's strength falter, his balance break. One final strike ended it. They broke through the gate as horns blared behind them. By nightfall, they were back in Sherwood, exhausted, alive. The rescue spread like wildfire. Songs began almost immediately, exaggerating details, smoothing edges, turning blood into legend. Robin sat by the fire, Marion beside him, listening. "They're turning you into something else," she said softly. He stared into the flames. "I'm still just a man." She touched his hand, not to them. In Nottingham, the sheriff surveyed the damage. Dead men, broken gallows, a crowd no longer afraid. He understood now. This was no longer rebellion. It was a war belief. And belief, once lit, was harder to extinguish than any forest fire. As the rain finally stopped over Sherwood, Robin looked at the men around him. Farmers, veterans, outlaws, free people bound by choice rather than fear. The line had been crossed. There would be no quiet ending, only victory or extinction. Winter came early, harsh and unmerciful. Frost crept across Sherwood, silvering leaves and stiffening the ground beneath men's boots. Smoke rose from hidden camps, thin and careful, as fires were kept low to avoid discovery. The forest that had once sheltered them now tested their endurance. Hunger became a constant companion, and even victory began to feel heavy. Robin moved among the camps each morning, speaking quietly, listening more than he talked. Men respected him, but respect did not fill empty stomachs. Supplies were thinner now. The sheriff had sealed roads, guarded mills, and punished anyone caught aiding the forest fighters. Nottingham was a clenched fist. Scouts returned with troubling news. "He's brought in mercenaries," much reported. "Foreign men, no ties to the land. They don't care who they hurt." That changed everything. Mercenaries did not fear reputation or legend. They fought for coin, and they burned what they could not control. The first village fell before dawn. Houses were put to the torch, livestock slaughtered in the fields. The smoke was visible even from deep in Sherwood, a dark finger pointing skyward. Robin clenched his jaw. "He's forcing us out." Little John nodded grimly. "And it's working." They met in council that night, firelight throwing long shadows across drawn faces. Every option carried risk. Stay hidden and watch villages die. Strike openly and invite annihilation. Marion spoke at last. Then don't give him what he expects. All eyes turned to her. He thinks you're bound to Sherwood, she continued. So hit him where he doesn't think you can. Robin understood immediately. The treasury wagons. The sheriff's winter taxes were being moved under heavy guard to Lincoln. Coin meant to buy loyalty, mercenaries, weapons. If those wagons vanished, the sheriff's campaign would collapse under its own weight. The journey would take them beyond their safe ground, across open roads and frozen rivers. It would be their most dangerous mission yet. They left before dawn, traveling light, moving fast. Cold gnawed at fingers and toes. Breath steamed in the air, every sound sharper in the brittle silence. 2 days later, they found the wagons. The convoy was massive, twice the size of previous tax trains. Armored escorts marched in tight formation. Crossbowmen rode flanks, eyes alert. Robin studied them from a ridge. Too strong for a simple ambush. So we don't ambush, Lil John said. We misdirect. At twilight, fires bloomed to the north. False camps, deliberately obvious. Horns sounded as the convoy shifted formation, sending men to investigate. That was when the real attack began. The road narrowed between stone outcroppings. Snow muffled footsteps as Robin's men surged forward. Arrows struck lanterns, plunging the road into darkness. Wagons screeched to a halt as caltrops shredded wheels and hooves alike. Mercenaries fought back hard. Steel rang. Screams cut the night. This was not restraint anymore. This was survival. Robin found himself locked in combat with a mercenary captain, a broad man with a scarred face and dead eyes. You're worth a fortune, the man grunted, driving forward. Robin parried, slipping on ice, barely keeping his balance. Then you're underpaid. They circled, breath fogging. The captain lunged. Robin sidestepped and struck low. The man fell, blood dark against snow. The fighting lasted longer than planned. Losses mounted on both sides. But eventually, the road belonged to Sherwood. They burned the wagons at dawn. Coins melted into slag. Ledgers turned to ash. The symbol mattered more than the silver. News reached Nottingham within hours. The sheriff's response was swift and ruthless. He declared martial law. Curfews enforced by the sword. Anyone found with food beyond ration was beaten or worse. But fear was no longer enough. Riots broke out. Soldiers were stoned. Banners were torn down in the night. The sheriff stood before his council, voice tight. Richard must not return to find this land in rebellion. He will, a knight said quietly. The sheriff turned. Then I will end this before he does. He sent word to Prince John. Reinforcements were coming. Back in Sherwood, Robin surveyed his men. They were thinner now, harder, no longer just defending. They were shaping events. Marion joined him, her cloak pulled tight. They'll come in force. Robin nodded. Then we make our stand where the forest ends. The choice was made. Winter deepened, but the fire had spread beyond the trees. What began as resistance had become open war, and both sides now knew there would be no return to the world as it was before. The snow fell thick and steady, swallowing sound and distance alike. Robin stood at the edge of the clearing where Sherwood thinned into open land, studying the ground with soldier's eye. Frozen ruts marked the road, and beyond them stretched fields stripped bare by winter and war. This was where he had chosen to stand, not because it favored him, but because it denied the enemy the comfort of walls and certainty. Men worked silently, digging shallow trenches beneath the snow, staking sharpened branches into frozen earth. Old shields were buried upright to break charges. It was crude, improvised, but it was war as they knew it, making do with what you had before someone took even that. Lil John approached, pulling his cloak tighter. Scouts say the column will reach us by midday. 200 men, maybe more. Robin nodded, eyes still on the land. They'll expect us to melt away. And if we don't, then we teach them the price of certainty. The waiting was the worst part. Men checked weapons again and again, fingers stiff with cold and fear. Breath rose in white clouds. Somewhere, someone whispered prayer. By late morning, horns echoed across the fields. Dark shapes emerged through falling snow, rows of shields, banners snapping, steel glinting faintly. Prince John's reinforcements had arrived, disciplined and merciless. The first clash came not with arrows, but with silence. Robin waited until the enemy crossed a marker he had set in his mind. Then his hand dropped. Arrows flew low and fast, skimming the snow, striking legs and horses. Men screamed as formations faltered. The enemy surged forward regardless, shields locking, pressing toward the hidden defenses. They hit the traps at a run. Spears punched up through the snow. Horses fell, throwing riders. Men stumbled into pits and were dragged down. Still, the column advanced, sheer weight pushing through blood and ice. Robin moved along the line, shouting orders, steadying hands. An arrow grazed his shoulder, tearing cloth and skin. He ignored it. Steel met steel. The sound was brutal and close. Every blow fell through bone and muscle. This was not the forest war. This was open ground, and the advantage shifted with every step. A mercenary captain rallied his men, driving a wedge toward Robin's position. The fighting there became desperate. Robin parried, struck, retreated, his world narrowing to the next breath, the next movement. Then the ground shook. From the flank, villagers poured in, dozens of them, armed with axes, clubs, anything that could break a man. They had not been ordered. They had chosen. The enemy line buckled. For a moment, it seemed possible. Victory hovered, fragile and bright. Then the cavalry charged. Heavy horse smashed into the flank, scattering men like straw. Screams tore the air as hooves crushed bodies into the frozen ground. Robin turned, shouting warnings too late. He ran toward the chaos, heart pounding. He dragged one man free. Then another. An arrow struck Lil John in the thigh, dropping him hard. "Get him back," Robin shouted. They pulled John into cover. As the line collapsed, the field became a slaughterhouse. Snow turned red and black beneath boots. Robin blew the retreat signal, a long, mournful note. It cut through the noise, a bitter acknowledgment. They fell back in broken groups, covering each other, leaving the dead where they lay. By dusk, the field was silent again. Smoke drifted from shattered carts and broken shields. Crows circled already. Robin stood among the survivors, face hollow, eyes dark. Nearly a third of his force was gone. Farmers, fighters, men who would never see spring. Marion found him near the tree lean. Her face was streaked with soot and tears she had not yet allowed to fall. "We held them," she said softly, "longer than anyone thought we could." He nodded, "and paid for every heartbeat." That night, the wounded moaned in the cold. Fires burned brighter than usual, risks forgotten. There was no song, no speech, only the grim work of counting the living and naming the dead. Miles away, Prince John's commander surveyed the field and frowned. His victory felt incomplete. "They should have broken sooner," he said. "They will," an officer replied. "No one survives losses like that." Back in Sherwood, Robin sat alone, staring into the flames. Leadership weighed heavier now than ever before. He had asked men to stand, and they had. He had not been able to save them all. War had stripped away the last illusion. This was no longer a fight for fairness or stolen coin. It was a fight for existence. And the cost had only begun to reveal itself. The forest was quieter after the battle, as if it too were mourning. Snow covered the scars of the field, smoothing the violence into something almost peaceful. But the men who returned to Sherwood carried the truth in their faces. Wounds festered. Hunger deepened. Winter pressed in harder than any army. Robin walked among the injured, offering what comfort he could, a grip of the hand, a shared silence. He knew their names, their stories, and that knowledge hurt more than the arrow that still burned in his shoulder. Lil John lay on a pallet near the fire, leg bound tight. He managed a grin when Robin approached. "Seen worse days." Robin snorted softly. "Liar." Despite the loss, something unexpected happened. More people came. Not fighters alone, but messengers, smugglers, monks, even a few minor nobles disillusioned with Prince John's rule. They brought news, food when they could, and something more dangerous, organization. One man, a clerk from Nottingham, spoke in a low voice. The sheriff is overreaching. He's seizing church grain, arresting guild leaders. The town is close to open revolt. That caught everyone's attention. People don't rise because they're brave, Marion said later, as they spoke by the fire. They rise because they've run out of fear. The sheriff, meanwhile, had learned from the battle as well. He reinforced the roads, posted cavalry patrols, and put a bounty on Robin's head. Enough silver to buy a lord's loyalty. Traitors began to appear. One was caught near the camp, trying to mark trails. He broke quickly under questioning. They'll surround you by spring, he sobbed. They know the forest now. Robin released him anyway, sending him back with a message he knew would be delivered. Tell the sheriff, Robin said, voice flat, that forest remember. The real blow came days later. A scout stumbled into camp at dusk, bloodied and shaking. They've taken Marion. The world seemed to tilt. She had been moving between villages, organizing relief, spreading word. The sheriff had waited, patient and cruel. They're holding her in Nottingham, the scout continued. Public trial. 3 days. Little John struggled to sit up. Then we go. Robin said nothing. His face had gone still, eyes distant. He had walked into traps before. He knew the shape of this one. That night, the camp buzzed with tension. Men argued in whispers, voices sharp with fear and anger. Rescue men assaulting a fortified town with dwindling numbers. Failure meant losing more than one life. At dawn, Robin gathered them. I won't order anyone to come, he said. This is my fight. No one moved. Little John stood with effort. You led us when we had nothing. You don't walk alone now. Others nodded. The decision settled like stone. They approached Nottingham under cover of fog, moving through drainage culverts and forgotten posterns known only to smugglers and thieves. Bells tolled in the distance, steady and ominous. Marion stood in a cell beneath the castle, cold and bruised but unbroken. When the sheriff visited, she met his gaze without flinching. He'll come, the sheriff said. And when he does, this ends. Marion smiled faintly. You're already finished. You just don't know it yet. The rescue erupted into chaos. Explosions of flame burst in the outer ward as stored pitch ignited. Gates were thrown open from within. Robin's men surged through narrow streets, fighting house to house. The townsfolk joined in. Stones from windows, doors flung open to hide the wounded. Robin reached the dungeon as alarm screamed above. He cut Marion's bonds with shaking hands. I told you to stay hidden, he said. She laughed softly. You never listened to me. The escape was brutal. They fought their way back through smoke and fire, losing men with every street. At the river gate, cavalry cut them off. Robin turned, drawing his bow for what felt like the last time. Then the gates opened. Town militia, emboldened, armed themselves and charged the soldiers. The line broke. The sheriff's control shattered in a single roaring moment. By nightfall, Nottingham burned, not in conquest, but in revolt. The sheriff fled. Prince John's banners were torn down. Exhausted and bleeding, Robin stood beside Marion on the hill above the town. Below them, a new order struggled to be born from ashes. This victory felt different. It was not clean. It was not complete. But it proved something vital. Power, once challenged openly, could fall, and legends, once rooted in truth, could change the course of history itself. Smoke hung over Nottingham for days, a gray shroud that refused a lift. The fires had been put out, but the damage lingered in charred beams, shattered windows, and the hollow silence of streets that had known too much violence. Robin walked those streets carefully, cloak drawn tight, watching the people more than the ruins. This was the moment after victory when things most often went wrong. The town council met in what remained of the guild hall. Merchants, craftsmen, and priests argued in low, urgent voices. They had driven out the sheriff, but authority was a fragile thing, easily broken and slow to replace. We can't rule ourselves, one merchant insisted. The crown will send another sheriff. Maybe worse. Aye, a blacksmith replied. But if we bow now, nothing changes. Robin stood apart, listening. He had no wish to govern a town. War had taught him what power did to men. Still, he could not simply leave. "They'll come," Robin said finally. "Prince John won't forgive this. And when he comes, he'll come hard." Silence followed. Marion stepped forward. "Then we prepare, not just with weapons, but with unity. If Nottingham stand together, it won't fall easily." Some nodded. Others looked afraid. Fear was still a language everyone spoke. Scouts soon confirmed the worst. A royal host was assembling to the south, larger than anything they had faced before. Banners of Prince John, mercenary companies, and knights loyal to the crown. This would not be a skirmish. This would be judgment. Robin returned to Sherwood to gather what strength remained. The forest camps were fuller now, but supplies were stretched thin. Winter still lingered, and men who could fight also needed to eat. Little John leaned heavily on a staff as they walked. "You thinking about leaving?" he said quietly. Robin didn't deny it. "If I disappear, the town might be spared." John snorted. "You believe that?" Robin sighed. He had hoped, once, that this could end with him fading back into the trees. But the world had learned his name. Names had weight. That night, messengers arrived from neighboring villages, then from towns farther away. Word of Nottingham's revolt had spread faster than fear. Men came not for coin, but for the idea that the crown could be resisted. By the time the royal host reached the outskirts, Robin's force had doubled. It still wasn't enough. The battle began at dawn on open ground near the River Trent. The royal army advanced in disciplined ranks, shields gleaming, banners snapping in the cold air. Their horns called confidence. They had crushed rebellions before. Robin stood with Marion and Little John, looking out over the field. "We don't win this by breaking them," he said. "We win it by surviving." The first wave hit hard. Heavy infantry pushed forward, forcing Robin's men back toward the river. Arrows darkened the sky. Shields splintered. Men fell. The noise was overwhelming. Metal on metal, screams, shouted orders dissolving into chaos. Robin moved constantly, rallying, redirecting, refusing to let panic take hold. He fought like a man who knew this might be his last day. Then something shifted. From far flank, horns sounded, not royal horns. Village horns. More fighters poured onto the field, striking the royal army's side. The line wavered. Prince John's commander ordered the cavalry forward. A decisive blow meant to end it. They charged across the field, hoofs thundering. Robin raised his bow and aimed, not at the riders, but at the banners behind them. The symbols of authority fell one by one. Men noticed. Confidence bled away. The battle dragged on for hours, neither side breaking. Blood soaked the ground, turning it slick and treacherous. Exhaustion dulled blades and slowed reactions. At last, with no decisive victory and mounting losses, the royal commander sounded the retreat. Not defeat, but not triumph either. The field belonged to no one. As the royal army withdrew, the message was clear. Crushing this rebellion would cost more than Prince John was willing to pay, especially with King Richard's return imminent. That night, Robin sat beside the river, washing blood from his hands. Marion joined him, quiet. "They'll call this a victory," she said. He shook his head. "It's a pause." "But a meaningful one," she replied. Word came days later. King Richard had landed. Prince John was retreating south to secure his own position. The pressure eased. Not vanished, but eased. Robin knew what came next. He did not attend the celebrations. Instead, before dawn, he slipped back into Sherwood alone, moving as he always had. Quiet, deliberate, unseen. Legends required endings, and this was approaching, whether he welcomed it or not. Spring arrived hesitantly, as if the land itself was unsure whether peace would last. Snow melted into swollen streams, and the scars of winter softened under new grass. Nottingham began to rebuild. Markets reopened. Children returned to the streets, their laughter cautious but real. Yet beneath the surface, tension remained, coiled and waiting. Robin stayed in Sherwood, watching from a distance. He had not vanished entirely, but he no longer stood at the center. Others had stepped forward. Town elders, village leaders, men and women who had discovered their own strength during the long months of fear. This, Robin believed, was how it had to be. Still, the crown could not be ignored. King Richard's arrival sent ripples through the land. Some hailed him as a savior. Others remembered the taxes and wars that had bled them dry. Richard was a soldier king, admired and feared in equal measure. He did not forget rebellion easily. When word came that the king was traveling north and had summoned representatives from Nottingham, the forest stirred. "He knows your name," Little John said, leaning on his staff. "He'll want answers." Robin nodded. "Then he'll have them." The meeting was set near the edge of Sherwood, neutral ground chosen carefully by both sides. Royal banners marked the clearing, and mounted knights stood watch, armor polished, expressions wary. This was not an ambush. It was a reckoning. Robin walked into the clearing alone. King Richard stood waiting, tall and broad, his presence undeniable. He wore no crown, only a sword at his side. His eyes studied Robin with the sharpness of a commander assessing a rival. "So," Richard said, breaking the silence, "the outlaw of Sherwood." Robin bowed, not deeply, but with respect. "Your subject," he replied. Still, Richard's mouth twitched. "You've caused me trouble. I've tried to prevent worse." The king gestured for him to speak. Robin did not soften his words. He spoke of abandoned veterans, of villages starved by taxes, of sheriffs who ruled through terror. He did not excuse violence, but he named its cause. Richard listened, expression unreadable. "You took up arms against my authority," the king said finally. "Yes," Robin answered, "because your authority was absent." Silence stretched. Knights shifted uneasily. At last Richard laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You argue like a man who expects to die." Robin met his gaze. "I argue like a man who's already buried friends." Richard turned away, staring into the forest. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I left men behind when I went to war," he said. "Too many. I see that now." He faced Robin again. "I cannot reward rebellion, but I can correct its cause." The terms were harsh but real. The sheriff would not return. Taxes would be reduced. Land seized unjustly would be reviewed. Sherwood would remain crown forest, but its people would not be hunted. In return, the violence would end. Robin accepted, not for himself, but for those who had paid the price. Richard stepped closer. "Your legend will spread whether you wish it or not. Legends are dangerous things." "So is silence," Robin replied. The king extended his hand. After a moment, Robin took it. When Robin returned to Sherwood, the forest greeted him as it always had. Wind through leaves, light shifting between branches. But something had changed. The war was over. The struggle was not. Men asked what would become of him. "I stay," he said simply, "but I won't lead." That surprised many. Some were angry, others relieved. Marion found him later, sitting where the trees opened onto the river. "You could have had a place at court," she said. He smiled faintly. "I belong here." She sat beside him. "Then so do I." As summer deepened, the stories grew. Ballads were sung in taverns, embroidered with miracles and impossible feats. Robin became larger than life, cleaner than reality. He did not correct them. Truth had done its work. What remained was memory. And memory, shaped by those who needed hope, would carry the story forward long after man had faded into the green shadows of Sherwood. Peace settled unevenly across the land, like a truce written in fading ink. Nottingham rebuilt its walls and trust at the same time, neither coming easily. New officials arrived under King Richard's seal. Careful men, cautious in their authority, watched closely by a population that had learned to taste resistance. The gallows remained standing, but unused, a silent reminder of how close the town had come to tearing itself apart. Robin kept his distance. He moved through Sherwood as he always had, hunting when needed, helping quietly when asked. To some, he was a ghost now. To others, a rumor that refused to die. That was how he preferred it. But peace had consequences of its own. Men who had lived by the bow and blade struggled to return to fields and workshops. War had shaped them, and the slow rhythms of ordinary life felt foreign. Disputes flared. Old grudges resurfaced. Without a common enemy, unity began to fray. Little John spoke of it one evening as they walked along the river. "We taught them how to fight," he said, "not how to stop." Robin sighed. That's always a harder lesson. Trouble came from the edges first. A group of former fighters began taking more than they gave, claiming Robin's name as cover. They demanded food, silver, obedience. The villagers sent word. Robin found the group camped near an abandoned mill. They were armed, confident, careless. "You're using my name," Robin said, stepping into the firelight. The men froze. One laughed nervously. "Thought you'd be proud." Robin's gaze was cold. "You're thieves." "We're survivors." Another snapped. "The war's over. No one's paying us now." Robin shook his head. The war ended so this wouldn't continue. The confrontation ended without blood, but not without consequence. Robin took their weapons and sent them away with a warning. Not everyone accepted it. Rumors spread, of Robin turning on his own, of injustice wearing the mask of justice. Legends rarely survive contact with reality. Marion watched it unfold with growing concern. "You can't control what people do with your story," she said. "I know," Robin replied, "but I can refuse to be part of a lie." The crown's presence grew stronger as summer waned. Taxes, though lighter, returned. Law followed order, slow and imperfect. Some welcomed it. Others resented it. One afternoon, a royal messenger arrived at the forest's edge, bearing sealed orders. King Richard requested Robin's service. "He wants you in the north," the messenger said. Border unrest. Raids from across the hills. Robin stared at the seal. He had expected this. Men like Richard valued proven commanders. The forest had never been his only battlefield. That night, Robin and Marion talked long into the dark. "If you go," she said quietly, "you may not come back." "If I stay," he answered, "the forest may never truly rest." They said little more. Some choices did not need words. Robin accepted the king's summons. He left before dawn, carrying no banner, no title, just a sword, a bow, and the weight of unfinished stories. Those who saw him go watched in silence, unsure whether to grieve or hope. In the north, the fighting was smaller, colder, less dramatic. Skirmishes along borders. Quick strikes, long marches. Robin led with discipline, not legend. Men followed because he kept them alive. Years passed. When he returned to Sherwood, his hair was touched with gray. The forest welcomed him back, without question. Marion was there, older, wiser, still unbroken. The world had moved on. New lords, new troubles. Robin had learned what war gave and what it took. He had learned that victory was often just survival by another name. The songs continued, louder than ever now, spreading far beyond Nottingham. They spoke of an outlaw who never left, who robbed only the wicked, who bent kings to his will. Robin listened sometimes in the shadows, a faint smile on his lips. The truth, he knew, was quieter, and quieter truths lasted longer than any song. In the end, it was not battle or crown that defined him. It was restraint, the choice again and again to take no more than was necessary, and to give what he could when the moment demanded it. The forest canopy shivered under the weight of the evening wind as Robin Hood's band regrouped near the edges of Sherwood. The battle earlier that day had left their spirits battered and their bodies bruised, yet the fire of resistance burned undiminished in their eyes. The smell of smoke and damp earth clung to their clothes. It was a tangible reminder of the skirmish they had survived, of the lives lost, and the ruthless reality that the fight for justice was as much against fear as it was against men in armor. "Will we ever see peace?" whispered Much, his voice barely audible over the rustled leaves and the distant crowing of crows. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to sharpen his arrowheads on a flint. "Every day, it feels like the sheriff's men are one step ahead." Robin, crouched beside him, glanced at the young man, noting the tension carved into his face. "Peace is a luxury, Much," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We are the shield for those who cannot fight for themselves. That is our burden and our strength." Around them, The forest was alive with subtle sounds. The snap of a twig underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl, the murmurs of men discussing their next move. Each sound carried weight. Each shadow could be an enemy scout. Robin's mind moved constantly, calculating, planning, always anticipating the next confrontation. The day's battle had taught them many lessons about terrain, about the loyalty of the villagers, and about the ferocity of the sheriff's reprisals. But the greatest lesson was one Robin had always known. Survival depended not only on skill with a bow or blade, but on unity, trust, and courage. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made the men freeze. Arrows were nocked in an instant, fingers tightening around wood and string. From the shadows emerged Friar Tuck, his robe torn and stained with mud, a grim smile on his face. "You lot left to play with the enemy a bit too long," he said, attempting levity, though his dark eyes betrayed exhaustion. "But I survived, thanks to a bit of luck and a lot of divine intervention." Robin allowed himself a brief smile, though his mind was already assessing the implications of Tuck's injuries. Every scar told a story, and every story reminded them that their struggle was far from over. "You fought bravely, Tuck," Robin said, offering his hand. "We need all the courage we can muster if we are to turn the tide." As night fell, the forest transformed into a realm of shadows and whispers. Campfires flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across weary faces. The men huddled around their modest meals, savoring stale bread and thin soup, yet finding solace in shared warmth. Tales of past exploits were exchanged, some exaggerated for morale, others told with solemn reverence for fallen comrades. In these moments, Robin understood the true heart of his rebellion. It was not the gold they stole or the battles they won, but the unbreakable bond between men who had chosen to stand together against oppression. The distant sound of hooves broke their fragile calm. Scouts returned from the perimeter, faces grim, eyes wide with urgency. "The sheriff's men are planning a larger raid," one of them reported, voice tight with tension. "They've learned from our ambushes. This time, they're coming for us in force." The words hung heavy in the night air. Robin's jaw tightened. Each decision now carried more weight, more risk. The forest, their sanctuary, was no longer a shield against the ever-watchful eyes of the sheriff's forces. Every trap they set, every ambush they planned, would be met with increasing cunning and brutality. Yet the fires of resolve were not so easily extinguished. Robin stood, eyes scanning the tree-line, mind racing. "Then we strike first," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "We cannot wait for them to come to us. We must control the battlefield, choose the hour, choose the place. And we must remind them why Sherwood belongs to the people, not the oppressors." Much and the others nodded, faces hardening with renewed determination. There was fear, yes, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they had each other, and that unity could turn even the direst circumstances into opportunity. Plans were whispered into the night, maps traced on the dirt, signals rehearsed, and contingencies imagined. Every man knew his role, every hand steady despite the pounding of hearts in anticipation. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant smoke. Robin's mind wandered briefly to Marion, imagining her in her small cottage, unaware of the day's chaos, yet enduring its consequences silently. He drew a steadying breath. Every victory, every act of defiance was for them, for the oppressed, for those whose lives had been made miserable by greed and cruelty. This was not a fight for glory. It was a fight for survival, for justice, for legacy. The first raindrops fell, tapping rhythmically against leaves and the roofs of makeshift shelters. The sound was oddly comforting, masking their movements, offering a natural cover. Soon, the rain became a steady drizzle, soaking clothes and hair, yet invigorating in its persistence. The forest seemed alive, the rhythm of the storm echoing the pulse of their determination. Robin's gaze swept the horizon. He could not predict the exact moment of the next clash, nor could he guarantee victory. But he knew one truth with certainty. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. And as long as they moved with purpose, as long as they remained steadfast, Sherwood would remain a symbol of defiance, a bastion of hope in a world rife with tyranny. The night deepened. Shadows lengthened. Fires burned low, casting golden halos in the darkness. The men of Sherwood prepared silently for what was to come, hearts heavy but resolute. Somewhere beyond the trees, the enemy plotted. Somewhere beyond the hills, injustice waited. And somewhere within each man, a spark of courage glowed, small, fragile, but unyielding. Robin Hood knelt by the fire, his bow resting across his knees, eyes closing briefly in thought. He whispered a silent prayer, not for himself, but for those he swore to protect. The path ahead was uncertain, the dangers immense, and the cost immeasurable. Yet in that quiet, in the heart of the forest, he knew this. They had chosen their fight, embraced their destiny, and would face whatever came with unwavering resolve. For Sherwood, for justice, for the people, they would endure. The forest lay drenched in the early morning mist, each tree cloaked in silver dew, and the air heavy with anticipation. Robin Hood's band moved silently through the undergrowth, boots sinking into wet earth, eyes scanning every shadow. The night's rain had softened the forest floor, muffling their steps, but had also blurred tracks, leaving them vulnerable to the sheriff's scouts. Each man knew the stakes. A single misstep could mean death, capture, or worse, the unraveling of everything they had fought to protect. "Keep your heads low and your eyes sharp," Robin whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves. "We know they're out there, waiting for a chance to strike, but we will not be caught off guard." Little John adjusted the strap of his great sword, muscles tensing beneath the soaked tunic. "I've heard whispers from villagers," he muttered. "The sheriff is sending reinforcements from Nottingham. Twice the men, twice the armor, twice the cruelty." Robin's gaze hardened. "Then twice the cunning, twice the courage. We do not fight them on their terms. We fight them on ours." The sound of distant hooves echoed faintly through the trees, sending a ripple of tension through the group. Arrows were drawn, and hands gripped weapons tighter. Each footstep, each distant shout could herald an ambush. The men's hearts beat in unison with the pulse of the forest, attuned to every change, every subtle shift in the wind or undergrowth. Suddenly, a scout emerged from the mist, sliding silently to the group, face pale and eyes wide. "They're closer than we thought," he said, voice quivering. 100 men, armored, moving fast toward the eastern ridge. "They've spotted some of our traps and are altering their path." Robin nodded, taking the news, calculating every possibility. "Good. Let them come. We'll give them exactly what they expect, and nothing more. Prepare the ridge. Set traps, barricade the narrow paths, and position the archers. We fight not just for survival, but to remind them why Sherwood belongs to its people." The men dispersed, each moving with precise purpose, their fear tempered by training and the knowledge that their lives, and those of countless villagers, depended on their actions. The forest became a symphony of preparation. The scrape of swords being sharpened, the thud of logs as barricades were reinforced, the whisper of arrows sliding into quivers. Every sound, every motion was deliberate, rehearsed, and essential. By mid-morning, the ridge was prepared. Fallen trees created natural barriers, and pits were hidden beneath foliage. Archers positioned themselves along the high ground, eyes scanning the approaching enemy. Robin Hood moved silently among his men, offering a word of encouragement, a reassuring nod, and a steadying hand on shoulders tense with anticipation. Then the enemy appeared. A line of armored soldiers emerged from mist, shields glinting in the weak sunlight, horses snorting and stamping impatiently. The sheriff's men, confident and disciplined, marched forward, unaware of the traps lying in wait. Robin lifted his hand, signaling the archers. Arrows whistled through the air, striking shields, horses, and unprepared soldiers. The enemy faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks. From the tree-line, the men of Sherwood launched themselves into action, striking with precision, exploiting every weakness in the enemy formation. The clash of steel, the cries of men, and the pounding of hooves filled the forest, creating a chaotic, visceral cacophony that would be remembered by those who survived. Little John met the first wave head-on, his greatsword cutting a path through armored foes, each swing measured, deadly, and relentless. The ground beneath him became churned mud and broken branches, yet he moved with purpose, every step a statement of defiance. Meanwhile, Robin engaged in guerrilla tactics, striking swiftly, retreating into forest, and reappearing in unexpected places. He guided his men with hand signals, voice commands, and subtle gestures, orchestrating a battle that was as much about cunning as it was about strength. Friar Tuck, wielding a staff with surprising skill, intercepted enemy soldiers attempting to flank their position. "You shall not pass," he roared, his voice carrying over the din of battle. His laughter, almost manic in its intensity, unnerved the enemy, who found themselves facing a foe both fearless and unpredictable. Amid the chaos, much moved with desperate agility, knocking arrow after arrow and firing into clusters of soldiers, each shot a reminder of the woodland fighter's intimate knowledge of terrain. The battle was not only physical but psychological. Fear and confusion spread among the sheriff's men as the forest seemed to come alive with resistance. Hours passed, the intensity of the conflict unrelenting. Men on both sides fell, leaving the forest floor littered with bodies, discarded weapons, and broken shields. Blood mixed with rainwater, mud with the cries of the dying, creating a scene that was brutal, raw, and unforgettable. Yet despite the carnage, Robin's strategy held firm. He had turned the forest into a weapon, and the enemy's superior numbers became a liability rather than an advantage. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the battlefield, and the surviving soldiers of the sheriff's army began to retreat, their cohesion shattered, morale broken. The men of Sherwood, though exhausted and bloodied, remained vigilant, eyes scanning the tree-line for any sign of a renewed attack. Robin had stood atop the ridge, surveying the aftermath. The forest was quiet once more, save for the distant moans of the wounded and the crackling of fires used to burn debris. His men gathered around him, bruised, battered, yet filled with a sense of grim triumph. "We fought with everything we had," Robin said, voice steady despite the exhaustion. "And we survived. But let this victory remind us, our struggle is far from over. The sheriff will return, more determined, more ruthless. We must remain vigilant, steadfast, and united. Sherwood's freedom depends on us." The men nodded, their faces a mixture of relief, pride, and sorrow for those who would not see another dawn. The forest, silent once more, seemed to embrace them, offering temporary refuge and quiet reflection. Robin knelt beside a fallen friend, touching the still warm blade in silent tribute. "Your courage will not be forgotten," he whispered. The cost of freedom was always steep, and today had reminded him of the price in blood, sweat, and unyielding spirit. As night fell, the campfires glowed softly, casting long shadows across weary faces. The men cleaned their weapons, tended to wounds, and shared words of comfort. Though exhausted, their resolve remained unbroken. For Sherwood, for justice, for the people, they would continue to fight. And in the quiet moments, amid the grief and exhaustion, a single truth resonated. Courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of justice were the forces that bound them together, and nothing, not even the might of the sheriff, could take that away. If you want, I can continue with part 12, where the story escalates toward a climactic confrontation and deeper insight into Robin's leadership and strategy. The dawn arrived pale and cold, mist curling along the forest floor like ghostly serpents, and Robin Hood's band moved silently, each step deliberate, every eye alert. The previous battle had tested them, had shown them the fragility of life and the cost of defiance, yet it had also steeled their resolve. They had survived against overwhelming odds, and that survival carried with it a renewed understanding of their mission. Sherwood was not just a forest. It was a symbol, a sanctuary, and a battleground all at once. Robin surveyed the men, noting the fatigue etched into every face, also the flicker of determination that refused to be extinguished. "Today," he said, voice low but commanding, "we strike at the heart of the sheriff's plans. He believes he can divide and conquer, that fear can fracture our unity. We will show him that Sherwood is not a place to be dominated. It is a place to be defended by every arrow, every sword, and every ounce of courage we possess." The men nodded, gripping their weapons with renewed purpose. Little John's broad shoulders carried the weight of past battles, but his eyes blazed with readiness. "Let him come," he said. "We'll remind him why his gold and armor cannot buy our forest, nor the loyalty of its people." The scouts returned moments later, faces grim, words clipped with urgency. "The sheriff has mobilized nearly 300 men," one said, breathless from a run. He's reinforced his cavalry, and they march in formation along the eastern ridge. They believe we've been weakened, that we've been broken. They are wrong. Robin's jaw tightened. 300 soldiers were a formidable force, far beyond the size of their band. But numbers alone could not win battles where strategy, terrain, and resolve mattered more than brute strength. He traced the ridge with his finger on the rough map etched in the dirt, noting choke points, potential ambush sites, and natural barriers. "We will not meet them head-on," he said. "We will draw them into the forest. Every tree, every stream, every shadow will be our ally. They do not know Sherwood as we do. They cannot fight what they cannot see." The men moved to their positions, spreading through the dense woodland with the practiced silence of those who had become part of the forest itself. Every footstep, every shift of the body against bark or brush was deliberate. The tension was palpable. Each man understood that this battle could define the future of Sherwood, the safety of the villagers, and the legacy of their rebellion. The first signs of the enemy emerged. The faint glint of armor in the mist, the distant thunder of hooves against the soft earth. The sheriff's men advanced in disciplined formation, confident in their superior numbers, unaware of the traps laid in careful anticipation. Robin signaled with subtle gestures. A fallen branch moved here, a pit covered there, archers ready along elevated positions. Every detail mattered. Every second could tip the balance between victory and slaughter. And then the clash began. Arrows rained from the tree-line, finding gaps in armor, striking horses, and sowing confusion among the enemy ranks. Soldiers shouted in alarm. Shields raised, trying to maintain formation, but the forest fought alongside Robin's men. Fallen trees barred paths, hidden pits swallowed the unsuspecting, and every movement was shadowed by a blade or arrow ready to strike. Robin moved like a phantom through the trees, his bow singing death and precision. Each shot was calculated, each movement choreographed with instinct honed by years of experience. He did not merely fight. He commanded the battlefield as though it were an extension of his own body, the forest a living ally responding to his will. Little John led the charge against the flank, swinging his great sword with brutal accuracy, cleaving through shields and armor. Men fell before him, unable to counter the combination of strength, skill, and the advantage of terrain. Beside him, much fired volley after volley, each arrow a warning, each release a reminder that Sherwood's defenders were not to be underestimated. Friar Tuck, unorthodox and unpredictable, struck at the rear guard of the enemy, using every improvised weapon he could wield. A fallen branch became a staff, a rocket projectile, and his voice rang through the forest like a battle cry. For Sherwood, for justice. His energy, seemingly inexhaustible, inspired those around him, turning desperation into courage, fear into action. Hours passed with unrelenting intensity. The forest itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of battle, alive with shouts, cries, and the clash of steel. Rain began again, soft at first, then heavy, drenching men and horses alike, turning the battlefield into a treacherous mire. Yet the men of Sherwood adapted, using the wet ground to their advantage, forcing the enemy to slip, stumble, and fall into ambushes. By late afternoon, the tide had turned decisively. The sheriff's soldiers, once confident in their numbers, now staggered under the relentless assault. Morale broke as carefully laid traps, guerrilla tactics, and relentless pressure exacted a heavy toll. Soldiers surrendered, fled, or fell. The forest had swallowed their advantage, and Sherwood's defenders had emerged as masters of the terrain. Robin stood atop a ridge, breath ragged, soaked to the bone, yet unbowed. Around him, his men gathered, bruised and battered but alive, faces marked with determination and relief. "We have won this day," he said, voice carrying over the heavy rainfall. "But remember, victory comes with sacrifice. We honor the fallen by fighting with courage, by defending the weak, and by never surrendering to tyranny." In the quiet aftermath, the forest seemed to exhale. Fires were lit, wounds tended, and men shared quiet words, some in mourning, some in gratitude, and all in solidarity. The cost had been high, yet the message was clear. Sherwood was free for now, because a band of men had chosen courage over fear, unity over despair, and justice over subjugation. As night fell, Robin Hood looked toward the distant horizon, knowing the battle was part of a larger struggle. The sheriff would return, as with challenges yet unseen. But in that moment, amid the soft crackle of fires and the muted sounds of the forest at rest, there was profound understanding. Courage, strategy, and the unbreakable spirit of those who fight for justice could defy even the mightiest foe. For Sherwood, for the people, for legacy, the fight would continue, and the legend of Robin Hood, forged in the fires of battle, would endure far beyond the reach of any sword or decree. The forest lay in a tense, fragile calm, the aftermath of the previous battle still etched into every scarred tree and churned patch of earth. Robin Hood's band had survived, yet survival brought no comfort. Each man knew the war against the sheriff was far from over. The enemy was relentless, their cruelty sharpened by humiliation, their resources vast. Robin's mind churned with strategy, weighing every possibility, anticipating every move, and preparing for the next confrontation. Robin whispered much, eyes wide with unease. I saw some of the villagers today. They fear the sheriff's retaliation. Some have fled their homes. Robin's jaw tightened. The forest had provided sanctuary. But even Sherwood's trees could not shield the innocent forever. Fear is a weapon the sheriff wields best, he replied quietly. We must fight not only with arrows and steel, but with hope. Every act of defiance must remind them that tyranny cannot last. Little John paced along the ridge, muscles tense beneath the damp tunic. We've slowed him, yes, but he'll regroup. Reinforcements will come, and next time, they'll know our tactics. We need a plan, something unexpected, something decisive. Robin nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. Shadows of clouds moved across the forest floor, distorted and shifting, as if the very landscape were conspiring with them. Then we strike before he can gather his strength, he said. We take the fight to him, not just to defend, but to change the rules of this war. We will hit where he thinks himself safe. The men prepared quietly, checking weapons, sharpening blades, and rechecking traps hidden along their path. Every step, every movement was deliberate, calculated. The tension was electric. The forest, alive with anticipation, seemed to hold its breath along with them. Friar Tuck emerged from the underbrush, mud streaking his robes, eyes gleaming with a strange mix of excitement and seriousness. I've been scouting the main supply line, he said, crouching beside Robin. A convoy carries provisions and reinforcements. If we intercept it, we cripple him before he can strike again. Robin's gaze hardened. A strike against the convoy would be dangerous, yet it could shift the balance decisively. Then that is what we do, he said, voice firm. We move at night, we strike with precision, and we vanish before they can react. Every arrow, every step, every decision will matter. As twilight descended, the band moved into position. Mist curled around the trees, masking their movements. The convoy's torches glimmered faintly in the distance, wagons creaking under their burdens, soldiers alert but unaware of the trap, waiting in the forest's embrace. Robin signaled the archers, their silhouettes merging with the darkness. Wait for my mark, he whispered. Do not fire until you see the enemy's flank exposed. Timing is everything. Hours seemed to stretch as the convoy neared the prepared ambush site. The men held their breath, ears straining for the sound of hoofbeats and wagon wheels, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Even seasoned warriors felt the weight of what they were about to undertake. Then, with a subtle movement, Robin gave the signal. Arrows whistled through the air, striking wheels, horses, and armor, sending men scrambling in disarray. The forest erupted in chaos, each shadow concealing a strike, each movement a trap. Soldiers fell, wagons toppled, and the sound of steel clashing filled the night air. Little John led the charge, his greatsword cutting a path through disoriented soldiers, each swing precise, calculated, and merciless. The convoy's formation collapsed under the assault, the forest swallowing their advantage, transforming the terrain into a lethal weapon. Much fired relentlessly, every arrow finding its mark with terrifying accuracy. The enemy's morale shattered as they realized the rebellion they had sought to suppress was more formidable than anticipated. Friar Tuck, ever unpredictable, struck from the shadows, his laughter echoing through the trees, unnerving the enemy as much as any blade. Robin moved among them like a ghost, his bows singing death and precision, striking at officers and leaders first to disrupt command. Each decision was instantaneous, every movement a calculated gamble. The forest was alive with strategy, a living battlefield shaped by the courage, skill, and determination of its defenders. Hours passed, and the convoy was decimated. Survivors fled into the night, leaving behind wagons, weapons, and the remnants of their morale. The band of Sherwood had struck decisively, demonstrating not only their skill but their ability to adapt, improvise, and exploit every advantage. As the adrenaline ebbed, Robin surveyed the scene, rain and sweat mingling on his face. The forest, scarred by battle yet resilient, seemed to breathe a quiet approval. Around him, his men gathered, weary but triumphant, faces illuminated by flickering fires and the pale light of dawn breaking through mist and canopy. "We have struck a blow," Robin said, voice steady yet carrying weight. "But remember, our struggle is ongoing. The sheriff will retaliate. Our actions tonight remind him that Sherwood is not merely a place to dominate, but a force to respect. We have shown courage, strategy, and resolve, but the road ahead remains perilous." Little John nodded, placing a hand on Robin's shoulder. "You lead with more than courage," he said. "You lead with vision. That's what keeps us alive, keeps Sherwood free." Robin allowed himself a brief, silent moment of reflection. The faces of fallen comrades, the laughter of the villagers, the resolve of men united by justice, all of it burned within him. Leadership was not merely about command. It was about responsibility, sacrifice, and the burden of choice. Every action had consequences. Every decision could bring victory or disaster. As the fires dimmed and the men settled into the uneasy comfort of night, Robin Hood stood apart, eyes on the horizon. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Betrayal, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of power lay ahead, and he would need every ounce of cunning, every bond of loyalty, and every shred of courage to continue the fight. The forest, a silent witness to both triumph and loss, seemed to embrace him in the chill of the night. The legend of Robin Hood was not merely built on victories, but on the perseverance in the face of relentless danger, the commitment to justice despite overwhelming odds, and the willingness to bear the weight of leadership when the cost was measured in blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Sherwood would endure. Its defenders would endure. And the story of courage, unity, and defiance against tyranny would echo through its trees for generations to come. Dawn broke slowly over Sherwood Forest, a pale, reluctant light filtering through mist and boughs, illuminating a landscape still scarred by recent skirmishes. Robin Hood and his band moved with careful precision, every step measured, every glance searching for signs of the sheriff's response. They knew retaliation was inevitable. The previous night's ambush had humiliated the sheriff and shattered his supply lines. Now, the trap would be set for them in return, and survival depended on foresight, cunning, and unwavering courage. "Robin," whispered Much, his eyes scanning the tree nervously, "I've seen tracks, fresh ones, cavalry moving fast. He's bringing reinforcements, more than we faced before." Robin's jaw tightened, his mind calculating rapidly. "He underestimates us," he said quietly. "He thinks we are weakened. He thinks fear will break us. Let him think. We will use that arrogance against him." Little John adjusted his greatsword, muscles coiled like a spring. "We can't fight them in open ground," he said. "Not with numbers like that. We need traps, ambushes, terrain advantage. The forest is our ally." Robin nodded. "Exactly. Every tree, every hollow, every bend in the path becomes a weapon. We control where he fights, when he fights, and how he fights. Tonight we strike decisively, but on our terms." The men moved to their positions, their movements ghost-like among the fog-laden trees. Every arrow was checked, every blade sharpened, and every trap inspected. The forest itself seemed to respond to their presence, mist curling around their boots, leaves muffling their passage, the faint sound of distant wildlife masking human movement. As evening approached, the sheriff's forces appeared, hundreds of soldiers in formation, confident in their strength, unaware that Sherwood's defenders had anticipated their route, their strategy, and their timing. Torches glimmered along the ridge, casting long, wavering shadows that stretched unnaturally across the forest floor. Robin crouched behind a moss-covered tree, signaling to archers hidden in the canopy. "Wait for my signal," he whispered. "Patience will be our deadliest weapon." The hours dragged. Tension thickened the damp air. The enemy advanced, unaware of the ambushes concealed along the ridge. Robin's eyes scanned every shadow, calculating trajectories, estimating distances, predicting the movement of both men and horses. The forest had become a chessboard, each branch, each fallen log, a piece in a deadly game of strategy. Then, with a subtle lift of his hand, the signal was given. Arrows hissed through the air, striking horses and soldiers alike, sowing chaos among the formations. The first line faltered, shields clattering, soldiers shouting in alarm. The forest erupted into controlled havoc, the band of Sherwood appearing from hidden paths to strike with precision. Little John charged into the enemy's flank, his great sword a whirlwind of steel and determination. Each strike was deliberate, calculated, and devastating. Men fell before him, unable to counter the combination of raw power, skill, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Friar Tuck, ever unpredictable, wielded improvised weapons with deadly effect, striking fear and confusion into the hearts of soldiers attempting to regroup. His voice rang through the trees, both battle cry and psychological weapon. "Sherwood defends its own." Much fired arrows with relentless accuracy, each shot a message. This forest was not theirs to conquer. The sheriff's reinforcements, though numerous, struggled to maintain cohesion. Every trap, every hidden pit, every concealed line of archers turned the enemy's strength into a liability. Hours of relentless combat passed, and the forest floor was scarred with the evidence of battle. Fallen soldiers, broken wagons, and the bodies of horses that had stumbled into hidden pits. Rain began to fall, turning the earth into treacherous mud. Yet the men of Sherwood adapted, using the wet ground to force the enemy into disarray. As night approached, Robin assessed the battlefield. The enemy was weakening, but he knew the sheriff was clever, ruthless, and capable of unexpected maneuvers. A final strike would be necessary to ensure complete disruption and a symbolic victory. "Form ranks along the ridge," Robin commanded. "We will drive them from Sherwood. This is not just a fence. It is a statement. Every arrow, every sword, every man here fights for justice, for freedom, for the people who cannot fight for themselves." The final clash was brutal and decisive. Soldiers attempted to regroup, but the forest defenders, inspired and disciplined, struck at every vulnerable point. Horses stumbled, soldiers fell, and the sheriff's remaining forces were driven into confusion and retreat. The forest echoed with cries, the clash of steel, and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to be dominated. When the fighting finally subsided, the forest fell into an eerie, tense silence. Fires were lit to tend the wounded, and men gathered to assess the toll. Faces were smeared with mud, sweat, and blood, yet eyes shone with grim triumph. Sherwood had endured, its defenders unbroken, its legend growing with every battle. Robin Hood stood atop a ridge, looking over the forest he had sworn to protect. "Tonight," he said, voice carrying in the still air, "we have defended not just trees and paths, but ideals. Courage, unity, and sacrifice are what define us. And though the sheriff may return, he will never break the spirit of Sherwood." Little John approached, placing a firm hand on Robin's shoulder. "You lead with more than strength," he said. "You lead with vision. That is why we fight, why we endure." Robin's gaze swept the horizon, eyes lingering on the distant hills, imagining the villagers who slept in uneasy safety. Every victory carried cost. Every decision bore weight, and every man who fought beside him had become part of something greater than himself. The legend of Sherwood was forged not only in battle, but in courage, loyalty, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. As night deepened, the forest seemed to breathe again, a living witness to both triumph and sacrifice. The men of Sherwood rested where they could, tending wounds, sharpening blades, and reflecting on the battles that had brought them to this moment. And amid the quiet, Robin Hood stood apart, contemplating the road ahead, knowing that the final confrontation with the sheriff was still to come. But one truth remained unshakable. Courage, unity, and unwavering resolve could defy even the most powerful adversary. Sherwood's defenders would endure. Its legacy would endure. And the story of Robin Hood, of sacrifice, strategy, and defiance against tyranny, would echo through the forest and beyond for generations to remember. The dawn was muted, gray clouds draping Sherwood Forest in a solemn shroud. The previous night's battle had left the earth scarred, the forest floor littered with broken branches, discarded weapons, and the echoes of cries long past. Robin Hood's band moved cautiously, every sense alert, aware that the sheriff, humiliated by his repeated defeats, would attempt a final, desperate strike. Yet there was resolve in their eyes, a quiet, unyielding determination born of hardship, unity, and the knowledge that they fought for more than themselves. "Robin," whispered Much, voice tight with tension, "I've seen tracks to the north, heavy cavalry. They're bringing everything they have. This could be the end." Robin's jaw set, eyes scanning the tree, calculating, predicting. "Then we make this end count," he said, voice low but unwavering. "Sherwood is not just our home. It is a symbol. If we stand together here, if we fight with every ounce of courage and cunning we possess, we can ensure that tyranny never finds a foothold in these woods again." Little John adjusted the strap of his greatsword, muscles tense, eyes steady. "We've fought before, Robin. Twice, thrice, in ways that should have broken us. Yet we endure. This will be no different. We fight smart, we fight together, and we fight with every ounce of who we are." Robin nodded, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. He walked among his men, offering a hand to those wounded, a word of encouragement to those fearful, and a steadying presence to all. Courage, he knew, was infectious, determination contagious. If his men faltered, Sherwood would fall. If they stood firm, even against impossible odds, they would endure. The enemy approached as the first rays of sunlight pierced the forest canopy, glinting off armor and weapons, creating an ominous, metallic shimmer across the landscape. The sheriff himself rode at the forefront, a figure of arrogance and calculated cruelty, convinced that overwhelming numbers would crush the rebels once and for all. Robin signaled his men into position. Archers took the high ground, blades ready in the underbrush, traps concealed along every path. Every step had been rehearsed, every tactic refined from previous encounters. Sherwood itself became a weapon in their hands, each tree, stream, and ridge serving as an extension of their will. The battle began with a sudden volley of arrows from the tree, striking horses, soldiers, and officers alike. Confusion rippled to the enemy ranks, disarray amplified by the hidden pits and fallen trees, prepared in advance. The forest erupted into controlled chaos, the sound of steel clashing against steel, hooves pounding mud, and cries of both fear and determination echoing through the mist. Little John charged with relentless power, every swing of his greatsword precise and devastating. Soldiers fell before him, unable to counter the combination of raw strength, skill, and the advantage of terrain. Beside him, Much fired arrows with deadly rhythm, each shot a reminder that the forest belonged to its defenders. Friar Tuck moved unpredictably among the enemy, using improvised weapons with terrifying effect. His laughter, echoing to the trees, became a weapon in itself, unnerving soldiers and disrupting their attempts at cohesion. "Sherwood defends its own," he cried, each word carrying both defiance and ferocity. Robin Hood moved like a shadow, his bows singing death and precision, striking officers and leaders first, ensuring that command among the sheriff's ranks dissolved. He directed his men with subtle gestures, whispered commands and tactical foresight, orchestrating the chaos into a deadly symphony of resistance. The battle raged for hours, each moment a test of endurance, skill, and courage. Rain began to fall, slicking the forest floor and turning it into treacherous mud. Yet the men of Sherwood adapted. Every misstep of the enemy became an opportunity, every mistake exploited with ruthless precision. As the sun dipped low, the sheriff's forces began to falter. Morale broke as carefully laid traps, guerrilla tactics, and relentless pressure exacted a heavy toll. Soldiers fled, some surrendered, and the forest seemed to reclaim its territory from the intruders. The tide had turned decisively. Sherwood's defenders had not only survived, they had triumphed. Robin stood atop a ridge, soaked, battered, yet unbowed. Around him, his men gathered, faces streaked with mud, sweat, and blood, yet glowing with relief and grim pride. "We have fought not just with arms," Robin said, voice carrying to a quieting forest, but with courage, with unity, and with the unyielding spirit of justice. Sherwood endures because of every man here, and because we refuse to bow to fear or oppression. Little John stepped beside him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. You've led us through impossible odds, Robin, not just with skill, but with heart. That is why we fight, why we endure, and why Sherwood will remain free. Robin's gaze swept the horizon, reflecting on those lost and those who survived. Every victory had come at a cost, every moment of triumph shadowed by sacrifice. Yet he understood, as leaders must, that sacrifice was the currency of freedom. He knelt beside a fallen comrade, whispering a prayer of remembrance, honoring courage that would never be forgotten. As night fell, the forest quieted, alive with the soft crackle of fires and the distant cries of those who fled. The men of Sherwood tended wounds, shared stories, and found solace in one another's presence. The battle had ended, but the legacy endured. Sherwood would stand as a symbol of defiance, of courage, and of unwavering loyalty to justice. Robin had looked toward the horizon one final time, the weight of leadership still heavy, but tempered by the knowledge that they had prevailed. Sherwood is ours, he said softly, more to himself than to any other. And so long as we breathe, so long as we remember, tyranny will never claim it. In the quiet aftermath, as the forest exhaled and the mist curled like silver smoke, a powerful truth resonated through every branch and leaf. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Sacrifice is the price of freedom, and unity can turn even the smallest band of men into a force capable of defying the mightiest adversary. The legend of Robin Hood, forged in the fires of battle, would endure, not as mere tales of gold and heroism, but as a testament to the human spirit, to the resilience of those who fight for justice, and to the enduring power of hope. Sherwood had survived, and with it, the ideals it represented, courage, sacrifice, and the eternal pursuit of freedom.